morning. Like Phil said, oh, hi. Okay, got a response. My name's Briana, and I would like you to know that I was joyful at all times while preparing for this. I did not complain at all to myself that I had to do this. Had a great attitude the whole time. Most of the time. It's good to check yourself, right? I get to do this. It's not a complaint. Side jokes being made about me. We are going through the story of Exodus. And where we're at now, we've parted the Red Sea. We're out of Egypt. We're on the journey. And the grumbling today is in the journey. If I could choose a superpower of any kind, it would be teleportation, because I hate jet lag more than anything. I would love to travel the world, but if you told me you can't sleep for 24 hours and you have one day in this location, I'd say, I'll see it another time. I just won't see it. It's fine. I won't enjoy it. So that's my grumbling. I am so far from that. Everybody read The Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit? So you know how they live in their cozy little hobbit holes and you're in the Shire and it's nice? And I'm like, ooh, I've never gotten past that. Once they start on the journey and they leave the hobbit town, I'm like, I'm out. I liked the Shire. Why couldn't we stay there? So that's the whole point, is we're now on the journey. The journey induces grumbling. And today we're going to read Exodus 15, 22 through 27 into 16, 1 through 12. So you'll look at this with me. It says, "Then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Sur." I did not practice the names. Just bear with me, I'm not Abram. "They went 3 days in the wilderness and found no water. When they came to Marah, they could not drink of the water because it was bitter. Therefore it was named Marah. And the people grumbled against Moses, saying, 'What shall we drink?' And he cried to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log, and he threw it into the water, and the water became sweet. There the Lord made for them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, 'If you will diligently listen to my voice of the Lord your God, and do what is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will not put any of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer.' Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they camped there by the water. They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the 2nd month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, 'Would that we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out of the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger.' Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven on you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them, whether they will walk in my law or not. On the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily.' So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, 'At evening you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumbling against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us?' And Moses said, 'When the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord.' Then Moses said to Aaron, 'Say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling.' And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked towards the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, 'I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God.'" The first thing that stuck out to me was the Israelites were just hangry, because I get there too. But the root issue is more than that. The more that I read, the more I was like, wait a minute. And the idea is the Israelites were developing a pattern of faithlessness that manifested in complaining. It wasn't that they were just hungry and thirsty. And in this circumstance, in this journey that we're in, the people of God are called to be obedient regardless of their circumstance. See, where have we come from? We came from Egypt, 400 years as slaves. The promises, they saw the plagues. They saw the Passover. They just saw the sea part, okay? And this is ironic because they saw what God could do with water. They saw that God could command an entire sea to part and create dry land that they could walk through. And yet, they are still unfaithful that God could provide them water to drink. And not only did he provide them water to drink, he could have just led them to a watering hole. But he proved his power in both ways. He said, I will make bitter water sweet, and I want you to trust me there. I've given you an undrinkable source. I can make this life source giving, where it wasn't. And then what does he do? He leads them to an oasis. Where you say, well, why didn't we just go to the oasis first, God? It said, trust me with what I have. With what seems impossible, I am God. In this, we see, well, if I could just see, I would believe. But how do we expect to see to believe when we're blind to our own reality? And that's the issue here. They saw the Red Sea. They saw it part, yet they still didn't believe. They had a distorted view of their past. They were not looking correctly at the situation or at God. And their complaining was focusing on what was wrong with the present and glorifying what was in the past. See, they just did it better in the old days. Well, my old days that like they say, what's the boys' Roman Empire? My girl Roman Empire is Regency England, right? It's like Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, yeah. So I'm like, oh, right, that's so nice. Okay, they put lead paint on their face that was white, which caused them to have pox. So they were, their eyebrows would fall off. So they would typically take mouse pelts and put them on their face as eyebrows. They also believed that water carried disease and caused them malady. So they only bathed like once a year, if that, fully submerged. It was typically, okay. They were chamber pots. I really like indoor plumbing, okay? And it was like, oh, the flowers were everywhere. They carried around sacks of flowers because everybody smelled so bad, okay? We can romanticize the past all we want and not look correctly at the future that we're living in. They had a distorted view, and we have a distorted view of our present daily, right? We watch a highlight reel of what's not real. We distort these things. And then we get Christian memory loss. How often do we forget what God has brought us out of just to complain where God has put us? We didn't like where we were, we didn't like where we are, and we don't like where we're going. It's the sin of discontentment. So why is it so important that God made all of these? Remember the Passover. Remember what happened here. Because we're not even where we're supposed to be going, and yet we've forgotten. We can't remember that God held power over the sea to believe that he would provide us with our necessities to live. And the Israelites were facing a discomfort, right? So it's easy to believe when you're in the moment, seeing what's happening. Take 2 steps removed, we completely forget. And now we're uncomfortable, so add on, okay, I'll believe when I see. Okay, but now when it gets hard again, what are we going to do? We've already forgotten. And then what we like to do is be proud of ourselves for walking through a desert, not walking through a desert that somebody else is. We're proud of ourselves for not struggling in the same way that somebody else is. And in that, the Israelites forgot who God was. They were unaware of their circumstances. And God says, remember your deliverer because your deliverer, remembers you. God didn't forget them in the desert. He took them there. He was there with them. But the Israelites didn't remember that. So what do they say? They say, now that we've gone the irony of water, when it comes to food, right? They say, would that we have died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out of the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. So stop for a minute. Were they sitting around meat pots, eating their fill? No. They were slaves to men of bondage. The pressure upon them kept growing till it was unbearable, right? You make bricks every day. Okay, you are no longer provided with the materials to make bricks. No more straw. You now have to make the same number of bricks and provide your own straw. They were facing insurmountable problems and circumstances. Yet in their heads, they think, God, were there not graves in Egypt to bury us with, that you had to bring us out into this wilderness to die? We had it good. They did not have it good. So in this uncomfortable chaos, we're like a dog going back to its vomit. We remember what it felt like, so that was more comfortable than the unknown and the faith that it takes to trust God that he will provide in the future and right now. You'll always be a slave to something, and they were a slave to their past. God said, follow me, and they said, well, we knew how to do this. Why don't we go back to what was easy? It wasn't easy. And in this, they're not even just grumbling at God, they're grumbling at Moses. Again, they forget that their grievances are not towards men, but their grievances need to be taken to God. And in their lack of trust and their thanklessness, the way they respond to God proves that they are not connecting his power with his being. They saw the glory of God, but they also saw the magic tricks of the Egyptians. They had already experienced these signs and wonders. So God says, I need you to see my glory, not just my signs. Again, it's that seeing is believing. Well, if we could see, we would believe. Well, they're seeing, but they're not believing. They continue to complain against Moses and Aaron. And they don't believe that God is God and that his glory is manifested in his presence. He doesn't want them to believe in the signs. He wants them to believe in his goodness. And they prove that they're spiritually immature. Have you seen the videos when they take kids and they put them in a room and they put candy in front of them? And they say, wait there, don't eat the candy, and I'll come back with something better. Now, we want to look at this as adults and go, well, I can handle that. We're like, okay, that's fine, right? You can, what's the reward, the delayed gratification, okay? There it is. It was delayed. So we're just testing our delayed gratification, right? And we're like, oh, that's children. Okay, well, have you seen the videos? You probably haven't seen these. These are less popular. They say, it's adults, and they say, try not to eat this. It's food from your favorite movies, from your favorite books, from your favorite everything, right? And they put them in front of them. Well, with the adults, they have to up the game, right? So you say, don't eat this, or there's a punishment if you do, or you get a better reward at the end. So now we're playing extra games in the game, okay? And we want to look at the kids' game and go, psh, I can handle that. But what do we do as adults? We just complicate the same game and then are proud of ourselves for beating the game. So that's why we treat God like a vending machine, right? It's like, let me punch in my prayers and get back what I want. Let me insert into God what I want back, and then hopefully I'll get what I want. But the idea is we don't play games with God, and we're not in control. We don't get to choose that. See, the Israelites acted like spoiled children. And you see the behavior. They demanded God's provision, they questioned God's protection, and then they doubted God's presence. And yet, we're like, well, they were just hungry. It's like, no, the root of the cause was much deeper than just their hunger. And they don't act in a way that glorifies God. They act in a way that proves their dependence is upon immediate physical needs and not trusting in God's provision. And this is why we look, too, as children, right? We're called to be spiritually mature. And so we look at the wisdom of the saints, right? We look at those who have gone before us, and we see the things, now that I'm not old. I'm getting into the olderness, okay? I'm aging gracefully. And I see now, you have a more, it's a 10,000 view look, right? You can pull back a little more and see what you've gone through and go, oh, I see how immature I was in that. I see how my perspective was so small in this moment. And now at a greater level, I see how insignificant that was. And that's what God's saying. This what you're going through right now is not insignificant. This is preparing you for the battle that's ahead. See, this isn't just about me giving you food and water. This is about you trusting me because there's a war, there's a battle that's coming ahead. If you can't trust me here, how are you going to trust me there? How am I going to know that you will do as I command? And God commands our obedience. It's not optional because he knows better. And that's where we distort our view and we say, well, I know better than God. And we must put him in his right place or the world becomes distorted. Exodus 15:11 says, who is like you, O Lord, among the gods? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in glorious deeds, doing wonders? If you can't trust that God will provide your basic needs, how will you trust that he will defeat your enemies in battle? Our surrender is not circumstantial. It's dependent upon God, and he doesn't change. He was the same in Egypt. He was the same in the desert, and he'll be the same in the promised land. And that's good, because if God changed, we'd be in trouble. See, they saw signs in Egypt, right? And the signs were wondrous, and they weren't always from God. So we can take these signs at face value, and we can see them. But if we don't attribute them to the power of God, then they're worthless. And that's what we see here. The trust factor isn't there. And they proved their immaturity towards God by their actions, by their grumbling. They weren't just hangry. They were at heart thankless and unseeing of a God who was going to provide for them. God's always the same. He's always holy and he's always good. But we are a stubborn and prideful people. We tend to magnify our problems instead of magnifying God. We stick a magnifying glass on our problems instead of magnifying and glorifying God. And it reveals the condition of our heart, and that's the issue. In not revering and remembering who God was in his awe-inspiring nature and glory, Israel's biggest problem is revealed. They refused to believe and remember who God was and what he had done. Their thankfulness and irreverence towards God who had saved them. Because when you're discontent, nothing will ever be good enough. Not taking a boat across the sea, but having it open up in front of you wasn't good enough. Because that's what they're proving now to God, that God, I didn't trust you. I trusted you, in the moment. But now when I'm uncomfortable, are you going to do it again? I need you to do it. God, do it again. They're now demanding of God, but not even towards God. They're still grumbling against men. It's deeper than just a complaint box that they're putting in civilly and going, because we all have complaints. We all have concerns. That's not what's happening here. And Moses stepped forward to God in all faith and asked of God. In all of this, however, every time they say they grumbled, God says, I hear you. They grumbled to Moses and Aaron, but God said, I heard your grumbling. God hears us even in our desert, right? He's proving his signs and wonders. He's not doing that for anything. He's proving it to say, I am God. I am not like the other gods. I am different. This is my glory and majesty. And you're not just attuned to your physical needs. You have spiritual needs. Why do we look at, by the way, the story that we read continues, they are unfaithful with the bread they are given, and then they complain about water again in the next chapter. It's a pattern, okay? And why do we look at these, why is we told a story about bread and water? Outside of seeing God's glory, it's because we can understand and digest these basic needs. This is a story that we can understand, but it's not just about living on bread alone. God's saying, I provide for you. Follow me. You have spiritual needs that are far greater than your immediate physical needs. He heard their complaints and he provided. And in that, he proves that he hears us. See, oftentimes when times get tough, we take our grievances against God instead of to him. We say, God, why did you bring me here? This is what you prayed for. Why am I here? Well, what you were delivered out of. So we go on this road trip, right? We're going. We weren't in a good spot to begin with. And we're in the car and we're going and it's rough. We're traveling. You ever road trip through the desert? Those rest stops are like 100 miles apart and there's like a hole in the ground, okay? It's rough. But he says, I'm moving you into something greater, but I need you to trust that we're going in the right direction. I need you to follow me. There's hard things ahead. We're in this Lenten season, right? God was tested in the wilderness. This is not something that our Lord has not experienced. This is not something that we experience alone. And that's why the Old Testament, this is a beautiful thing because it shows in the future of our deliverance. We're part of this story. But acting like we're part of the story and being a part of the story are two different things. It's not about the sign, it's about God. But when we act like Christians, once we get uncomfy, our act falls apart very quickly and our true self is revealed. Our facade of who we play falls off. That's why if we act like a Christian, it's like the Pharaohs had his magicians show signs. They both fall apart at the moment of coming before a holy God. We can't fake our way into it. It's not about the act, it's about the condition of our praise. False positivity won't get you there. So that's why it's not actually about grumbling, right? It's not acting like if I act happy and never complain that I'm doing what I'm supposed to, because that's what it said, right? Don't grumble. Well, they grumbled wrong. No, that won't get you very far. And that's the problem, that we place our trust in things, right? And if we manifest good moods, then that will save us from our bad situation. When that falls apart just as quickly as this idea of as soon as time gets hard, our faith falls away because we don't trust that God can do miracles with water when he just parted a sea. And these trials by fire, James is my favorite way of saying it. It says, count it all joy, my brothers, when you meet trials of various kinds, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And sometimes I think I believe I say that, and then that'll be the last time I have to say it. And then something else happens, and we're right back in James. Count it all joy, dear brothers. when you meet trials of various kinds, because you will meet trials of various kinds. It's promised. You can't have a testimony. Said it. Hold on. Hang with me. You can't have a testimony without a test. Because I messed it up, you'll remember it now. Like Abram said last week, our trials will be our tribulations. These trials by fire, these fires that purify us, right? How do you purify gold? How do you refine it to make it better? You burn off the impurities. So we always want to take our trials and say, God, listen, I'm done, right? I'm good enough, right? And he goes, no, there's a battle ahead. You're weak. You're immature. Your faith needs testing. You need proving. You're not testing me. I need you to mature, to grow. Because childlike behavior is okay for a child. But it's not fulfilling and sustaining as an adult. Life is always moving. And if you stay behind, it'll run away with you, from you. If we continue to act like children, if our faith is not tested, if we continue to present to the world a Christianity that holds no water, we won't get very far. It's not about the act and the outward appearance that you show. It's about God's holiness. That's what it's about. It's about God proving, I'll take care of you because I'm God and because I'm holy. And that's our trust in that. The Israelites had a choice as well. They could have chosen, like Moses, to go before God in all his power and believe. And you read through Exodus, Moses is transformed and is matured. See, we want to view the Bible as just, oh, well, it's this. It's a character arc, right? We had dramatic irony. That's not accidental that we see this version of water in water. It's not accidental that we watch the growth and God's hands on his life in Moses' life. These stories are more about stories. They're about God's provision, and they apply to us today. So why it was such a disgrace to God? Because that's what it was. It was the sin of discontentment. It was a disgrace in God's name for their unbelief and untrust when he showed his glory, and they treated him just like they treated Pharaoh's magic tricks. That was a nice sign. Thank you. Can you do it again? Instead of the awe-inspiring glory of a God who will provide. So the call is to maturity and to examine our own hearts and what we need to do in order to follow God. Because you'll worship something, you always will. And if that thing is not God, God does not allow himself to be second in our lives. We can't worship something else because he's a jealous God. He won't settle for second best in our lives. But he trains us and allows us with grace to put him there. So, what tainted view of your life do you hold? And what do you hold on to as a God? What holds you back? What glorious thing in the past, what glorious thing in your present do you think will serve you better than a holy God? Where do you choose comfort instead of God? Where do you place your trust instead of God? In who do you place your trust instead of God? Because we also are in a desert. We're in a journey of faith. Faith is not a one-time deliverance. This is proven, right? They were delivered out of Egypt, and now they're on the journey of faith. But the cool thing is, when we cry out in our wilderness, God hears us. He's not like the other gods who don't have ears, who don't listen. See, I think we have an incomplete view of who God is. Because when we place our trust in things that don't respond, there is no life. Psalms 13 says, "But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountifully with me." You take one chapter back. It's the Song of Moses in Exodus 15. And I would urge you to go read it this week. And remember what you've been delivered from. On this journey of faith, it's so easy to become uncomfortable and discouraged and magnify our problems over God. So take a step back and view correctly who God is and what he wants from you. Because remember, your deliverer remembers you. It's about viewing correctly. And God hears you in the desert. God's faithful despite our circumstances. And Christians are called to be spiritually mature. We've seen what can happen in this world. And we've seen that we need Christians like us in this room. Not people standing up here, but people in our communities, people in our city, people who will stand firm in their faith, not because it looks a certain way or it acts a certain way, or I will know you by your love. And that comes from more than just a show of Christianity. It comes through spiritual maturity tested by fire. Through the journey that we've taken with God providing and proving himself time and time again. We must be thankful, despite our circumstances, from where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. Because God does not change past, present, or future. He's good, and he's delivering us. He has delivered us, and he will deliver us. Remember God's goodness and what he has delivered you from, and choose to worship him. Joy is a choice. I don't know if any of you have had the privilege of experiencing somebody going through the trial of their life and watching God's hand exist in the lowest of lows. Because a peace that passes all understanding is a beautiful thing to watch. When everything is stripped away, yet God remains, nothing can be stopped. If you'll pray with me this morning. Father, forgive our ungrateful hearts. Father, we confess our pride, our inhumility on placing things and people and situations above you. Father, we look at you correctly today as God, a God who hears, a God who sees, a God who loves. Not out of benefit for ourselves, Father, but for your glory. Let us be obedient and steadfast in our servanthood towards you. Father, show us how to love you. Show us how to trust you in our wilderness, in our desert. Father, as we're in this Lenten season, Jesus, we remember who you are. Father, you're not just a God who is nameless and faceless. But Father, you walked through the wilderness for 40 days. You sent your Son before us. You chose to love us. Father, in our selfishness and unbelief, we repent. We ask your forgiveness, and we ask that you would be glorified today.